Welcome back this week. So we have been talking about compassion. We talked about the blind man, the leper, different areas in the Bible where we see Jesus having compassion on someone and acting upon that compassion, right? And so the heart of this is just to know that compassion is more than an emotion. It's followed by action. And we as Christians are called to have compassion upon people and to serve people out of that compassion. So let's dive in today with the message that God has put on my heart. Hey guys, welcome back this week as we continue to talk about compassion and how Jesus was moved with compassion, that it was more than just a feeling for him, it was an action, right? So, back in college, no, I was already graduated from college. I was with my wife, who is currently in college, and she wasn't my wife at the time. We just started dating. We were driving down a road that had a lot of construction when I ran over a nail and got a flat tire. Yeah! So I thought I knew how to change a tire. I've watched videos on it. I've seen my uncle do it, seen my dad do it. But I never had done it myself before. I was doing what I thought I knew, but I just couldn't seem to get the flat tire off. I got the jack from the trunk, jacked up the car, and tried to get the bolts off the tire. It shouldn't be rocket science, right? So I did what every grown man does when he's frustrated and can't figure it out. I called my dad for help. He drove to where I was at, which was out of the way, and he came to help me, but not help me by changing the tire for me. He instructed me on how to do it so I could learn for myself. Apparently, you're supposed to loosen the lug nuts and bolts before you jack up the car. Who knew? So in no time, we had the flat tire off and we had the donut put on. My dad saw that I was in distress and needed help, and that I was craving his knowledge and life experience. So he had compassion for me, and who was my girlfriend at the time, who is now my wife. He could have ignored me, told me to call a tow truck, AAA, or did it himself, which would have taught me nothing. Instead, he taught me how to change a flat tire. Not only that, I'm pretty sure we went and got food afterward. So this week, we're going to see a story that's similar like that in the Bible. So if you have a Bible in front of you or have your phone, open up that Bible app. We're going to be looking at Mark 6:30 through 44. The apostles returned to Jesus and told him all that they had done and taught. And he said to them, "Come away by yourselves to a desolate place and rest a while." For many were coming and going, and they had no leisure to even eat. And then they went away in a boat to a desolate place by themselves. Now many saw them going and recognized them, and they ran there on foot from all towns and got there ahead of them. When he went ashore, he saw a great crowd, and he had compassion on them, because they were like sheep without a shepherd. And he began to teach them many things. And when it grew late, his disciples came to him and said, "This is a desolate place, and the hour is now late. Send them away to go into the surrounding countryside and villages and buy themselves something to eat." But Jesus answered them, "You give them something to eat." And they said to him, "Shall we go and buy 200 denarii worth of bread and give it to them to eat?" And he said to them, "How many loaves do you have? Go and see." And when they had found out, they said, 5 and 2 fish. Then he commanded them all to sit down in groups on the green grass. So they sat down in groups by hundreds and by 50s. And taking the 5 loaves and 2 fish, he looked up to heaven and said a blessing and broke the loaves and gave them to the disciples to set before the people. And he divided the 2 fish among them all. And they all ate and were satisfied. And they took up 12 baskets full of broken pieces and of the fish. And those who ate the loaves were 5,000 men. Now, when it's talking about 5,000 men, it's literally meaning 5,000 men. So imagine 5,000 men plus wives, plus children. It's a lot of people to feed. So Mark 6:33 through 44 is another depiction of Jesus' miracle of feeding the thousands. It is the only miracle that's referenced in all four Gospels. So in this story we see that Jesus took the disciples to rest, but a crowd of 5,000 men, plus women and children, followed on foot when they saw them. They were so famous, basically, that they were recognizable. So when they were trying to get rest, they weren't able to. Imagine Zac Efron coming out to, let's say, Phoenix to try to rest, or passing through Phoenix to get to a desolate place in Arizona, and they're recognized. So they're followed by paparazzi, by fans. They all just want to flock to this celebrity. The 12 disciples were shepherds in training, but they couldn't ignore the thousands of lost sheep that needed Jesus. John 6:2 says, why thousands upon thousands of people were seeking after Jesus. It says, a large crowd was following him because they saw the signs he was doing on the sick. So they saw the miracles he had done. They've heard of this man. They've heard of his teachings. They've witnessed it themselves. They were following Jesus because of physical things that he was offering. Much like how I kind of had the expectation that my dad would change a tire or pay for a tow truck for me when I got that flat tire, but instead he did something that I wasn't expecting. So these people were coming out to see some kind of physical miracle, but instead Jesus taught them, just like my dad taught me. And here it says that Jesus had compassion, right, when he saw them like sheep without a shepherd. Compassion in Greek means to be moved with love in the deepest part of a person. So compassion is to be moved. And when you're moved, action follows. Jesus saw them yearning for him, for a loving rescuer, a teacher. So Jesus offered them teachings. When Mark says there were sheep without shepherd, he was saying that there was nobody to teach them. Sure, they had religious leaders and everything, but were they teaching them to follow God, or these fence laws that they put up? So Jesus functioned as the good shepherd and taught the people. After he taught, the disciples noticed it was late and people needed to eat. So they wanted to send them away. Jesus saw this as another opportunity to show compassion, right? And to perform a miracle to show his glory. He fed them, all of them, with food left over from that minuscule amount of food that the disciples had with them. In the same way that God had provided manna for his people, they were wandering in the desert. Jesus provided food for these people in this desolate place. So there are a few takeaways from this message that are pretty applicable today. The biggest one is sometimes things don't go as planned, right? We can plan something, but then God has a different plan. Just like the disciples planned to rest, but that didn't go according to expectations. The disciples planned to send the people away to get their own food, but that didn't go as expected. Jesus had a different plan for both situations. However, rest is very important, right? You can't pour from an empty cup. But sometimes there's things that come up, and that's the next thing is priorities. There are things in your life like rest is a priority, but sometimes there's something that comes up that needs to be prioritized over rest. Sometimes that's service. Sometimes that's your kid falling. Sometimes that's your wife needing your support. But you get things like you get home from a long day of work and expect to rest, but then something comes up that you need to take care of. So you have to set that priority, right? But rest is still so important. That's a third takeaway. You need to take care of yourself before you can take care of others. And you need time to recharge and gather up your thoughts and your emotions and process through everything you experience while you're in ministry, because ministry is just going about your day serving the Lord. Doesn't necessarily mean working at a church. but it's draining, right? It's draining constantly being of service to people. Service to people, service to God, service to the community, even when it hurts. And so you have to take care of yourself and recharge. So again, we see Jesus having compassion in this part, in this pericope, in this passage. We're to have compassion in the same way because we're called to be Christ-like. Not like our mentor, not like our dad, but like Christ. So when you see someone in need, have compassion. Remember, compassion is more than an emotion. It means to act upon that compassion. So, your last takeaway is to let yourself be moved. Let your heart break for what breaks God's heart. Try to see through God's eyes and how you can help someone. So this week, go out, look through God's eyes. Serve the way Christ would. And make sure you get some rest. Thanks, guys, and I'll see you next week.